mandated fuel to use in sprint car racing is methanol. Now the race cars put all their fuel in these tanks that sit behind the rear axle in the car. The tanks are made of plastic, but inside is a very strong rubber bladder, so oftentimes if you see a wreck, this plastic tank will often be squished right up against the frame rails. Now it's very rare to have a fuel leak because that rubber bladder just moves in line with the tank, and it's amazing what some compressed air and a rubber mallet will be able to do once you've had a hit in these tanks to bring them back out into shape. Now methanol is a very environmentally friendly fuel. It's also a very safe fuel. It's got a very low ignition point, so it doesn't explode on impact like petrol. So it also provides good performance. It's a very high octane fuel, but it's also very safe. Now the sprint cars will use about 2 litres a lap. So they're not very fuel efficient, so these tanks will hold up to about 90 litres. So that'll get you through a 35 lap main event, but they're called a sprint car, so they can't go too much further than what they can hold here when they're fully filled. So we'll take a look as we walk forward to see how this fuel travels from the tank all the way through the motor to bring those 850 horsepower to life. So to get the fuel from the tank, sprint cars run a mechanical fuel pump that runs off the back of the camshaft in the motor. So it sits down inside the cockpit of the race car. You can see the fuel line running into the pump, and then we've got 3 lines coming off. Now one goes off into the motor, we'll get to that in a second. We've got 2 bypass lines. So that is the pill block and also the high speed. So within the pill block, the drivers will change the size of a very small pill that sits inside to determine how rich or lean the motor is. And the high speed comes on when the motor's at maximum RPM to return more fuel back to the tank. Nice lean burning motor to get maximum horsepower right at the top end. Now that fuel line that runs off into the motor, we'll take a look to see how that gets the fuel directly to the motor. Well, once we get down to the motor and the fuel is coming out of the pump, it actually gets into the engine via these nozzle lines directly into the heads of the motor. Now, drivers and crew chiefs will pull the spark plugs to determine how rich or lean their motor is running to help determine the fuel system setup. One of the other great tools over the last few years is these weather stations. So you can take a look at the temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and that will help you determine the fuel system you want, because you need to be right on the money. You don't want the motor too lean. You can easily burn one of these motors down. So you need to be very efficient in the fuel that you use. You want it burning just the right amount to get the maximum horsepower, but not doing any damage to your engine. So once the fuel's gone through here, sometimes you'll see when drivers entering the corner as they roll off the throttle, pops a blue flame out of the exhaust, and that's simply the unburnt fuel going through and burning as it exits the exhaust. So a pretty simple system in terms of being mechanical, no electronics. A lot of ingenuity has gone into it and a lot of know-how, so you really need to know how to tune these motors to get the most out of them and not hurt them, because there's plenty of races down the road you want to be at them.